This Rise and Shine podcast series has been made possible by the generosity of the Zeidelman Family Foundation, which is committed to the unity and continuity of the Jewish people through meaningful and relevant Jewish education and wisdom.
If we see our needs as opportunities to connect with our parent in heaven, then we might even do as we learn in our sources, be able to bless God, not just for the good, but also for the bad.
This is Rise and Shine, a podcast that offers timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations to fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note. Here is Adrienne Gold-Davis.
In Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, we learn the following phrase: without bread, there is no Torah. Without Torah, there is no bread. This enigmatic statement is both literal and figurative. Literally, we understand that without sustenance of the body, one cannot properly feed your soul. Quite literally, the feeding of the poor is a mitzvah the Jews take seriously. You know, there's countless organizations that do specifically that, from Leket, a food rescue org in Israel that plants and harvests and distributes food, to the many Jewish food banks and soup kitchens in every community. Figuratively, I think this dovetails brilliantly with Abraham Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. Do you know it? In his triangle, or better yet pyramid, of human requirements, that bottom base level is physiological. It's hard to think deep thoughts when your belly is empty and when your throat is parched. We see the same thinking in the great Torah commentator Maimonides' work on the laws of repentance. He describes 4 levels of suffering. The worst, he says, is financial suffering. The resulting hunger and poverty can be a grinding thing, but he asserts there are even higher levels we can experience. The second level is physical suffering. But even above that, he claims that the second highest level of suffering is watching a loved one suffer. Let's unpack that for a minute. Is it possible to be a harder experience to watch a loved one suffer than to suffer yourself? I only had to become a mother to answer that one. I remember the early years of motherhood and watching my children's developmental disequilibrium, usually in the form of social dynamics. I was 40 years old, and I went to my grade 1 son's school at recess to personally witness the bullying and marginalization he had told me he was experiencing. I stood off in the bushes near the playground, holding myself back from grabbing the 7-year-old boy and punishing him for not giving my kid the ball. Now, it might have happened, too, if one of the recess monitors had not seen me and come over and encouraged me to leave quickly and quietly. I cried the whole way home. It hurt me so badly to watch my kid left out of a game that I'm telling you, I wanted to burn down the playground. I know small kids have small problems, but I had never felt the rage and pain I felt that day before in my life. Recently, my mom's had health challenges for the first time in her very long life. The panic I felt in my chest, the helplessness and the fear shook me to my core, and I remembered something she used to say to us when we were kids that I never believed. She'd say, if we were sick or hurt, "If I could have this instead of you, I'd gladly take it." Well, you know what? I felt the same way about her. When I have watched the suffering of our people since October 7th, I have felt that same pain and desire to trade places with the hostages to alleviate the suffering of a single parent, a single friend who's aching from the yearning to have their loved ones back. But Maimonides says there is a higher level still. What he says is the worst level of all, and that is, ready? No suffering. No suffering? What on earth could that possibly mean? I mean, how is it possible that the highest level of suffering is not suffering? For that answer, we need to go back to the very beginning of our history in the book of Genesis, where we learn about the punishments given to Adam and Eve and the snake for the sin of eating the forbidden fruit. We learn that Adam was punished so that by the sweat of his brow he would eat bread. And what this meant was that labor and stress and financial worries would replace the instant bounty that the garden once provided. It says sweat of the brow, not sweat of the back. Mental worries, not physical ones, which implies that worrying about his financial situation would beset him and cause him grief. And Eve, well, she would suffer through childbirth, which was once apparently painless. So, if we extrapolate a little bit here, we might say that Adam would be worried about making a living and his concerns about being a provider, and Eve would be worried about her children. And while these roles can also be reversed, it's clear that in most families, someone sweats one and the other sweats the other beyond most other dilemmas. Now the snake, who provoked the whole incident by tricking Eve into doing what she was told she should not do, what was its punishment? We learn that God says to the snake, "Because you have done this, cursed are you more than all the livestock and all the wild beasts. On your belly you shall crawl, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." Sorry, but that doesn't seem like much of a punishment to me. So there's several ways of looking at this. Rabbi Daniel Travis said this following statement. He said, God originally created snakes with legs, and when the serpent lied to Eve and enticed her to act counter to God's will, God punished all snakes by removing their legs, since the serpent was a physical manifestation of the Satan, who was the embodiment of falsehood. The punishment God meted out must have somehow reflected this attribute. He says, what makes the removal of his legs an appropriate retribution for the serpent's transgression? So he writes, a leg symbolizes support and foundation. Sturdy legs allow a table to stand firmly so that it can serve its function. If the legs are weak, the table will collapse. When God removed the snake's legs, he was showing that falsehood doesn't have a leg to stand on. But my all-time favorite understanding of this punishment comes at it like this. If all the snake's needs are met, then it's as if God is saying to it, you will never have the need to look up and search for me. I don't want to hear from you ever again. Kind of like a parent who says to their kid, here's $10 million. Now go away. I never want to hear from you or see you again in this lifetime. I've provided for all of your needs financially. Just get out of my life. You are banished. And it seems that the highest level of suffering and punishment is to have all your needs met. From a Jewish philosophical position, it appears that our very needs are actually vehicles to connection to the greatest pleasure that's imaginable to us, and that is to search for the connection to our very source, our very essence, and to have a relationship with our Creator. The snake was so reprehensible that he was effectively told, you'll never have needs. As such, you'll never need to seek me out. What a paradigm shift this is for all of us. If we see our needs as opportunities to connect with our parent in heaven, then we might even do as we learn in our sources, be able to bless God, not just for the good, but also for the bad. It's a high spiritual level to be sure, but one I certainly aspire to. So this week, can you examine your needs, that which you are lacking, and ask yourself how to reframe them as opportunities for connection and engagement with the source of all blessings? Can you consider that if the greatest level of suffering is no suffering at all, then perhaps that which you're struggling with has a possibility of being the very birthplace of your spiritual growth and joy? May none of us suffer on any level whatsoever, but when we do, may we meet the challenges with grace and gratitude. Remember that just because something is difficult does not mean that it isn't necessary.
Thanks for listening to Rise and Shine. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to Momentum Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join Adrienne again next time for more timeless wisdom and uplifting meditations that fill your heart, feed your soul, and start your day on a positive note.
This podcast was sponsored by the Zeidelman Family Foundation. Spread the wisdom. Inspire Jewish individuals around the globe by supporting Momentum's podcasts. To sponsor, contact podcast@momentumunlimited.org. You're listening to a Momentum podcast. For unlimited inspiration, wisdom, and empowerment, visit momentumunlimited.org.